Hi everyone, this is Shalini, Assistant Professor of English, St. Joseph's College of Arts and Science, Cuddalore. Today we are going to see the play The Rivals, written by R.B. Sheridan. R.B. Sheridan was born on 30 October 1751. He was died on 7th July 1816. He was an Irish satirist, politician, playwright, poet, and a long-term owner of the London Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. He is known for his plays such as The Rivals, The School for Scandal, The Duenna, and A Trip to Scarborough. He was also a Whig MP for 32 years, the British House of Commons for Stafford. He is buried at Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. His plays remain a central part of the canon and are regularly performed in the worldwide. Characters of the play: Anthony Absolute, a wealthy baronet. Captain Jack Absolute, son of Anthony Absolute, disguises as Ensign Beverley. Falkland, friend of Jack Absolute, Bob Acres, Lydia's suitor. Fag, captain's servant, Sir Lucius O'Trigger, is an Irish baronet. David, servant of Bob Acres. Coachman, Thomas and Bob Acres' servant. Mrs. Malaprop, widow, and guardian for Lydia. Lydia Languish, lady love of Captain Jack Absolute. Julia, Lucy's friend, Falkland's fiancée, under control of Anthony Absolute. Lucy, Lydia's maid. Delia, Malaprop writes letter to Lucius by using this name. Malapropism is a verbal blunder in which one word is replaced by another similar in sound but different in meaning. William Shakespeare had used the device for comic effect. The term derives from Sheridan's character, Mrs. Malaprop, in his play The Rivals. In this play, Mrs. Malaprop, a widow and aunt of Lydia Languish, is known for her English. She uses wrong words in wrong places while speaking. The famous phrase of the play was the derangement of epitaphs, where arrangement was misplaced as derangement and epithets as epitaph. Let us move on to the summary. Act 1, Scene 1 and 2. Two servants, Fag and Thomas, run into one another on the street in the town of Bath. Fag is surprised to see Thomas, but Thomas explains that his ever-impulsive master, Sir Anthony Absolute, decided on the spur of moment to bring his entire family to town from the countryside. Thomas asks after Sir Anthony's son and Fag's master, Captain Absolute, but Fag surprises Thomas by saying, "Now works for someone named Ensign Beverley." Fag then explains that Ensign Beverley is really the same person as Absolute, which confuses Thomas even more. The play straightaway displays its dominant feature by beginning with a deception about a deception. Fag has not changed employers. His employer has taken on a false identity, but because he has pretensions to being a man of the world, he draws out his explanation and plays a little joke on the more straightforward Thomas when he cryptically says that Ensign Beverley and Captain Absolute are two halves of the same man. Now Fag explains Absolute has taken on the false identity of Ensign Beverley for the sake of love. Thomas notices that Absolute is paying Lucy money. Meanwhile, Fag rushes off to tell Absolute that his father, Sir Anthony, has come to the town. Lucy gives Lydia some romantically titled books she found for Lydia in the libraries of Bath. Lydia's cousin, Julia, newly arrives in Bath. Mrs. Malaprop, Lydia's aunt, refuses to allow Lydia to correspond with Ensign Beverley, even though Mrs. Malaprop is using the name Celia or Delia to exchange love letters with someone she recently met. Julia asks if Lydia is concerned that Ensign Beverley has less money than she does. It is explained at this point that Lydia will lose 2/3 of her substantial inheritance if she marries someone without her aunt's consent, but she is determined to do it. Lydia announces that she could not love a man who would be concerned about her keeping her inheritance. Lydia and Julia then discuss Falkland, Julia's fiancé who rescued Julia from drowning. He starts argument with Julia because he is insecure about whether or not Julia really loves him. Sir Anthony and Mrs. Malaprop are concerned about Lydia's wish to marry Ensign Beverley. Sir Anthony suggests to Mrs. Malaprop the idea of Lydia marrying Sir Anthony's son, Captain Jack Absolute, to which Mrs. Malaprop also agrees that. Mrs. Malaprop's previous choice of a suitor for Lydia was Bob Acres. She also worries that Lucy told Lydia about Mrs. Malaprop's letter writing and gives Lucy letter to give to Sir Lucius O'Trigger, the man with whom Mrs. Malaprop has been corresponding. Lucy has been delivering letters for several characters and has convinced Sir Lucius O'Trigger that he has been writing back and forth to Lydia rather than to Mrs. Malaprop. Act 2, Scene 1 and 2. Captain Jack Absolute discusses with Falkland the idea of marrying Lydia. Captain Jack Absolute refuses to let Lydia lose a portion of her inheritance, and Falkland suggests that Captain Jack Absolute approach Sir Anthony and Mrs. Malaprop. Jack wonders whether Lydia will still want to marry him if she knows that he has money. He tells Falkland that Julia has come to Bath with Sir Anthony. Now Bob Acres arrives and Falkland asks him how Julia is doing. Bob Acres informs Falkland that Julia is doing well, dancing and singing and charming those around her. Falkland is upset that he has been feeling less lively than Julia when they have not seen one another. Acres has changed his style of dressings and the way he wears his hair to catch the attention of Lydia. Sir Anthony tells his son, Captain Jack Absolute, that he intends to provide for his son financially on the condition that his son marries someone of Sir Anthony's choosing. Sir Anthony refuses to entertain the idea that his son is already in love with someone. Lucy gives Sir Lucius a letter from Mrs. Malaprop written as Delia, letting him think that the letter has come from Lydia Languish. Lucy is out of the state looking for Sir Lucius. When she finds him, she assumes her guise of being a simple messenger. Sir Lucius reads the letter Mrs. Malaprop sent, which begins with the puzzling declaration. Sir Lucius leaves and Fag approaches. Lucy continues to pretend simplicity, but Fag tells her to be straight with him. Then reprimands her for passing letters to Sir Lucius, saying he will tell his master Ensign Beverley that Sir Lucius is a rival. Lucy tells Fag that the letter is actually from Mrs. Malaprop, not Lydia. But Ensign Beverley has an even more serious rival, that is Captain Jack Absolute. Act 3, Scene 1. Captain Jack Absolute has heard from Fag that his father wants to force him to marry the girl he already loves. He determines to make up with Sir Anthony, but at the same time, he wants to keep his relationship with Lydia a secret. Sir Anthony, pleased with Absolute's obedience, excitedly reveals that the match he wants to arrange is with the beautiful young Lydia Languish. Absolute pretends never to have met Lydia and declares that he is indifferent to her beauty, so long as he can please his father. Act 3, Scene 2. Falkland expresses dismay that Julia has been so happy while they have been apart, and Julia tells Falkland that she has only been pretending to be happy. Falkland worries that she does not really love him but merely feels obligated to marry him, and Julia assures Falkland that she does love him, assuring him that she would love him even if they broke off their engagement. Falkland gets angry that Julia would even consider breaking off the engagement, and Julia lives in sadness and frustration. 3. Mrs. Malaprop talks to Captain Jack and about Lydia's interest in Ensign Beverley. Captain Jack is allowed to see Lydia, and he tells Mrs. Malaprop to inform Lydia that Ensign Beverley has arrived to see Lydia. Lydia arrives and Captain Jack tells Lydia that he came in place of Captain Jack. He agrees to be content even if she loses part of her fortune. Scene 4. Bob Acres and David, his servant, discusses Bob Acres' new look. Bob Acres then practices new fashionable dance steps also. Sir Lucius arrives and Bob Acres expresses a feeling of frustration to him. Bob Acres explains that he has come to Bath hoping to marry someone who, it appears, he will marry a man called Beverley. Sir Lucius encourages a reluctant Bob Acres to challenge Beverley to a duel. Act 4, Scene 1 to 3. Bob Acres' servant David is trying to discourage his master from sending the letter challenging that Beverley to a duel, fearing that Acres will be killed. Jack Absolute asks why he has been sent for, and Bob Acres shows him the challenge. Jack Absolute reads the letter, then asks if Bob Acres really intends to fight Beverley. Bob Acres replies that Sir Lucius has convinced him to. When Jack Absolute wonders what he has to do with his duel between Acres and Beverley, Bob Acres asks him to deliver the message to Beverley, since Absolute and Beverley are acquainted. Absolute promises Beverley will get the note. Bob Acres says he wishes to fight that night so that he will still be worked up from his talk with Sir Lucius O'Trigger. Then Bob Acres asks Absolute to be his second in the duel. When Absolute demurs, Bob Acres says that Sir Lucius will be his second. Captain Jack and Sir Anthony arrive to see Lydia and Mrs. Malaprop, and Lydia discovers to her dismay that Ensign Beverley is really Captain Jack Absolute. Sir Lucius challenges Captain Jack to a duel, which he accepts. Falkland wishes to repair his relationship with Julia, but he is still not happy when he receives a letter of forgiveness from Julia, for he feels that forgiveness should not come from a woman unbidden. He then designs an idea to test Julia's feelings for him. Act 5, Scene 1 to 3. Now Falkland tells Julia he needs to leave because he has had a disagreement with someone, and Julia tells him she will elope with him. He tells her that he made up the story of the disagreement, but that he now believes that she truly loves him and is ready to marry her. She is relieved that he is not in any trouble, but she is hurt that he deceived her. She tells him that she will never marry another, but is now without hope that he will ever stop doubting how much she loves her. Julia and Lydia discusses their dashed romantic hopes. Later it is revealed that there is to be a duel involving Sir Lucius Trigger, Squire Bob Acres, Captain Jack Absolute, and Falkland. The complicated dueling situation is addressed. Eventually the duel is stopped and Lydia announces that she loves Captain Jack Absolute. Also, Sir Lucius learns that Delia is Mrs. Malaprop and not Delia. Julia forgives Falkland. Thank you.